Welcome back to Dominique Medici Art Academy. I'm Dominique Medici. Thanks for joining me. For those of you that are new to the channel, Dominique Medici Art Academy is an online, self-paced art school. I will teach you how to draw and paint. Year 1 is dedicated to drawing. Each week on Monday and Wednesday, a new episode is uploaded. At the end of the month, there is a weekend workshop that ties together all the month's lessons. If that's something you're interested, check out a link in the description below. In day 3, we saw how to see two objects as one shape. In today's lesson, we take it a little further and introduce verticals, horizontals, and follow-through lines. Okay, let's get into it. In day 3, we were looking at how all these shapes really create one bigger shape. We're introducing 3 new ideas: the vertical, the horizontal, and a follow-through line. Right? These are natural ideas that kind of come in when we're starting to expand our composition. And they're a great way for us to locate and find relationships between the different components in our composition. So for example, let's talk a little bit about a vertical. If we're looking at this wine glass, right? This is a new object coming into the composition. And the first thing to locate on it is that if we take a look right down the center, we can see that there's a straight line, right, running through. And similar to that first episode where we looked at the circle, and the idea that each side mirrors the other. The first thing to do to draw the wine glass is first locate its center line. This is a great way to draw something that really is very subtle and very specific. It would be very easy to draw a very wonky wine glass. It's a little more challenging to draw it with lovely curves. So the vertical comes into play and it really helps. So what we could see here, right, a vertical line through the wine glass. Where does it go through the apple? So if I hold my pencil in front of it, I can see the center line is running through here. Now how wide is that in relation to the apple itself? Is it a half? No. Is it a quarter? It's just about a quarter of the overall width. Maybe a little less. But it's nice to think in quarters, halves, or thirds. So if we were to then just kind of, again, just like we've done before, just roughly guess where that line is, somewhere in there. And then we can hold our pencil, again, on this line, and just check in relation to the width of the apple, does it look like it's occupying about the same relationship from this side to this side as it does from this side to that side, right? And maybe more or less. And again, right, we're gonna kind of feel it out and we'll do a little more careful measuring. So that's the first step. We get our center line in. The next thing is we can use that same vertical to also check the outermost point on both sides of the glass. So the fullest part of the belly of the glass is probably about here, right? We can make a little point here. So it's the place where it keeps coming out, but then it starts returning in. The fullest part on the glass. Now, what if we also, again, drop a line down, a vertical from that, and say, where does that come in relation to the apple? So in this case, it's a little further in. It's not half, it's a little more than a quarter, but it gives us an idea. It's almost a quarter. So I'll just lightly pop in a line here. We'll just pop in this line, roughly at a quarter. Now let's take a look at the other side. In this case, we drop that vertical down. We're coming, yeah, not quite halfway into the pear, but a little shy of it. So again, we'll guess that. Right, this is the best thing we can do, is always guess. Let's see what else it comes through, right? Dropping that vertical down, it also comes through this point. through this little point here where the pear starts changing direction. And again, just a little less than halfway. So even without measuring, we're kind of guessing, and our guess is pretty good. So this is something very interesting. I think, we don't actually have that much trouble seeing what's in front of us. And I think even when we guess, we're pretty close. We're in the ballpark. The challenge is in refining our observation, refining our precision when we're drawing, and refining the shapes. That's the part that's challenging. Getting close, getting in the ballpark, getting near is not that hard. Refining is the hard part. With just 3 vertical lines, we're getting very close to the boundaries of the wine glass. Now, the next thing we could take a look at is, where do we think it stops at the top? Where's the top of the glass? And again, just eyeing it. So if we look at the top of the pear, and we let our eye travel to the top of the glass, would you say it's about a pear's height above? A little bit more or a little bit less? My sense is, when I look at it, that it's about a pear's height above. And if I just ignore the whole shape and just look at this distance, I can say, yeah, maybe it's about there. Give or take, I know that that's going to be fairly close. So the next thing I can then do is verify with a measurement, right? So using my thumb as one part of the measurement and the pencil as the tip of the pencil as the upper part of the measurement, I then just bring that up and I can see that, yeah, it's about the same. I could do the same thing on my drawing and bring this up and I can see, okay, I'm a tiny bit high with the lines that I drew. So a little bit lower. Now, we're getting a shape up here that we haven't seen before, which is an ellipse. And one of the ways that we can draw this ellipse is by looking at the horizontal that runs through it. So the horizontal, we're pretty parallel with the edge of the paper, right? And we get the bottom and we get the top. So within that band, erase here. So I'm looking, where else do I see some really obvious horizontals? Well, this is one that we didn't talk about last time, but we clearly see it now, which is the plane of the tabletop where it meets the back wall. So in this case, we're using a horizontal to understand an angle. So I'm looking, where does this line pass through my pears? Right? Same question as where the center line of the wine glass passed through the apple. I can now do the same thing on the horizontal. Where are we passing through? So it looks like just about halfway on the apple, maybe just a tiny bit below. So that can serve as a little kind of reference point. In the pear, looks like we're about a third. So that also makes sense. Now initially I can draw it in as a straight line. Right? That just gives me a sense of where it is. Now if I want to check how off of the horizontal it is, I can first lay my horizontal here and just look at the angle as it's coming up. It gives me a sense. So we can use the horizontal to guess the angle. It's a good way to work. Use something easy and familiar to work out something less familiar. So that's one way of doing it, right? We can use our horizontal to guess our angle. The other thing we can do is see it as a follow-through line. It's not the best example of a follow-through, but it will work. So what that means is, if I continue this line through my object, are there any interesting points that it crosses through that might be helpful? Well, it's interesting. If we look here, it's exactly halfway between where the apple and the pear meet. Let's see what else it passes through. This point on this shadow, even though we don't have it yet, so maybe not that useful, but also again about halfway of the overall height. So that is quite helpful for us. It gives us a sense of where that line is. See, and even that shows me that this probably could be a little bit lower and come up a little bit higher. Something like that. Right? And as we become more sure of where we want that line to be, we can make it a little bit darker, a little bit more defined. From here, let's also take a look at where the stem of the wine glass, where is that in relation to the pear? And again, let's use our horizontal to check. So it's just below the top. Looks like it lines up right at the edge where we see the pear changing direction. So roughly about here. Now, we can also indicate the width of the stem just by eyeing it. Just by eyeing it. So how big does this look in relation to, say, the stem of the apple? Well, it looks like it's at least twice as wide, maybe almost 3 times as wide. That gives us an idea. How wide is the stem in relation to how much pear do we see? So it looks like it's about 1.5 that width from the edge of the stem to the edge of the pear. There's almost 2 widths to the edge of the pear, between 1.5 and 2. Something like that. So we're just making comparisons, observations, and comparisons. Okay, so we know our width. We have an idea of the base. We have a sense of where the top is. That already is beginning to really help us draw the rest of the pear. Now, we talked about the widest point, which is here, right? It's right here. Now, where is that in relation to either the apple or the pear? In this case, it looks like we're about an apple's height up. Or if we're working off of the pear, looks like we're about 2/3. So you can use both of them, both of those measurements, to give us a sense. Looking at the apple, measuring up about an apple's height, and we're getting somewhere around here. And again, what we can do is verify just by taking a little measurement. So again, using my thumb on the top of the pencil, bring that right up, and look at that. It's actually a little bit higher. Looks like it's roughly in the right place. So we have the widest point, we have the base, we have the top. Now, if we were to drop the vertical from the edge of the glass, how much further in from the widest point of the glass is it? You can see it's not a lot. We can do the same thing on the other side, and we can see it's not very clear, so I'll make a little mark here. we drop that line down, that vertical, again, we can see that it's just a little bit in. So this gives us a little bit of an idea of how much we need to come in at the top. At this point, what we want to do is go back to what we did in day 1. We have a little bit of a boundary, and now we just need to sketch out the wine glass. There are certain points we know we need to meet, like this is the widest point. Here's the glass. And then we start tapering in from the widest point to the top. Now we do the same thing on the other side. Coming out, or you can come from the width and start coming in. Either way works. And then from the fullest part of the glass, coming in to the top of the glass. Now it's interesting because the first stab at it, if you look at it at first glance, it's like, yeah, fine, that's a wine glass. At second glance, we can see that this side does not quite mirror this side. So that's the next challenge, is getting them to read the same. But there's another thing which is interesting, that it looks like the glass is a little too big in relation to the fruit. So how could that be? Well, it could be a couple things. Am I too full at the bottom, or is my stem, where the stem ends, too low down? Does it want to be a little higher? So this is what we need to do next, is maybe take a couple of measurements. First question I'm having is the wine glass too far to the right? Does it want to come slightly to the left? And I'm going to use this straight line. So I'm using a pencil. A good tool to use for this would be like a skewer, something that's thin and very straight. So it looks like to me that I could come over a little bit. Okay, so at this point, let's take a look at that ellipse. So I can see that it's definitely within these two bands that we created, these two parallel horizontal lines. And if I look towards the edge, it just kind of has a nice taper. It meets at these 2 points here. Here's our bottom, here's our top. Here's our center. Now, in a way, we could just draw a straight line right through the center of that ellipse. And that additional vertical line, very similar to drawing the sides of the glass, will also help us get the curves, because we'll want to try and mirror each of those 4 curves to each other. And if we look closely at the reference, you can see that it doesn't come to a point, it's a curve that rounds and then opens back up. Today we've added two new tools to our toolkit, the horizontal and the vertical. Keep practicing and just grab a couple of objects, put them together, and use these ideas of vertical, horizontal, and follow-through lines to construct the big shapes. If you're enjoying these lessons, please subscribe and tap the bell to be notified when new episodes are uploaded. In day 5, we'll take our still life a little further. I look forward to seeing you there.